So, sorry. Before you do some work on your own, for a quick little review, we are going to do this short story with a couple questions together so that we can practice some of those plot questions and what that looks like in a passage. So we're going to read this short story called The Oak and the Reeds, and it says it's an Aesop fable, and a fable means that we learn a lesson. So we know in this story we're going to learn a lesson, but we also know that means it's fiction. So it's going to have those plot elements of sequence of events in a story where we have the introduction and the rising action, and then the climax, and then things start falling off to the end, and in the end everything is resolved. So let's read this short story. A giant oak stood near a brook in which grew some slender reeds. When the wind blew, the great oak stood proudly upright with its 100 arms uplifted to the sky. But the reeds bowed low in the wind and sang a sad and mournful song. You have a reason to complain, said the oak. The slightest breeze that ruffles the surface of the water makes you bow your heads, while I, the mighty oak, stand upright and firm before the howling tempest. Don't worry about us, replied the reeds. The winds do not harm us. We bow before them, and so we do not break. You, in all of your pride and strength, have so far resisted their blows, but the end is coming. As the reeds spoke, a great hurricane rushed out of the north. The oak stood proudly and fought against the storm. While the yielding reeds bowed low, the wind gained fury. All at once, the great tree was picked up by the roots and fell among the pitting reeds. So it says here the lesson is it's better to give in when it is unwise to be stubborn. So they're saying in this story not to be stubborn, because we learned that from the tree. He thought he was Mr. Almighty, and in the end, he was not Mr. Almighty. So let's look at question 1. The rise in action is. So the rise in action is when like things are starting to get good, but we're not to the top of that mountain to show like the big thing of the story. So let's think about the story. The reeds blow in the wind. Does that really show like things are getting good? Not really. That just kind of tells us what they're doing. The oak brags about its strength. Okay, so think about when he started bragging about his strength, that's right before something happened. So that could be the rise in action. The oak lifts its many strong arms. Well, that doesn't really show like something's about to happen, or it didn't, something didn't happen after that moment. The reeds become sad about the wind. I don't think that they ever became sad. So the only answer is B. The oak brags about its strength. So when I'm looking up that mountain, I'm right here in the middle of the rise in action. Up here's the peak. So right here, the oak brags about his strength, but we're not to the big part of the story yet. Which sentence from the text is the climax of the plot? So what I have to do is I have to think to myself, okay, what is the climax? What is the part that gets really good, where things start changing a little bit, okay? Or when it's like the most exciting part. All right, so let's see here. A giant oak stood near a brook in which grew some slender reeds. Was that like a moment of the story? Not so much. You have a reason to complain, said the oak. To me, that was just conversation. That wasn't anything like exciting or changing or big in the story. As the reeds spoke, a great hurricane rushed out of the north. Would that be the climax, like an exciting part of the story? I think H would be correct, because we're not to like the ending of the story, like something else hasn't happened, but like it's a big deal that all of a sudden the hurricane is going to come and something's going to happen. And then D or J says, all at once the great tree was picked up by the roots and fell among the pitting reeds. Well, to me, that's kind of like the falling action, or maybe even the resolution of the story, the ending there. All right. Number 3, what is the resolution for this plot? So the resolution means like, how does it turn out? What is the ending of the story? Well, let's talk about that. Well, in the end, the reeds continue living and the oak tree fell down. So the hurricane stops blowing. Well, we don't know that. The hurricane destroys everything. Well, it didn't say it destroyed everything. It said it only destroyed the oak tree. The reeds survived the hurricane, but the oak does not. And that was kind of the ending of our story. So there's a little example there. So now you're going to do a fun little Nearpod game to practice.